Welcome back. This is Rudy Giuliani with Rudy's Common Sense. And today we really are going to have an exercise in common sense. In fact, we're going to discard studies, books, analysis, because in the subject we're talking about, it always seems like the analysis comes out in the direction of the prior beliefs of the person doing the analysis. And in fact, even though some of them may be perfectly valid and completely persuasive, at least to me, they lose credibility because they always seem to come out to support the position that the person had in advance. I'm talking about the subject of gun control. So we could sit here and present studies that show that gun control has absolutely no effect on violent crime of any kind, at least certainly not any new gun control laws. And you could show studies that show that it does have an impact on crime. You could show studies that gun control has only marginal impact on criminals because criminals are not subject to control. It controls largely the behavior of innocent people. Or you could show that it does have an effect on criminals. There are studies that do that. That's because it's become a partisan issue. And really, it's become a partisan issue because the Democrats have been quite successful in using it as a deflection, as a dodge. So when there is a violent situation, let's just take one for a second, and then we'll bring us up to date. The one in Buffalo. First thing you hear is more gun control laws, more gun control laws, more gun control laws. And that blocks out the discussion almost of anything else. And that's been doing that for the last 20, 25 years. So the real question is, would new gun control laws have any impact, number one, but maybe even more importantly, has gun control laws and the lack of gun control laws doesn't have anything to do at all with this massive last 2-year increase in crime. Because what we should be doing is we should be looking at honestly and objectively, no matter whose political ox it gores, what are the primary causes of this massive increase in crime, which in some ways is historic. And then we should list those, and we should make changes there, not on things that are irrelevant to it. Does that make sense? So what are we talking about? We could be talking about 2020, in which America had the largest increase in homicide and murder as a nation ever, percentage-wise. Or 2021, when we came very close to matching that and instead had a different kind of record. We had, I think it was 16 cities that had the most murders in their history, including, let's say, the city of Philadelphia, which had massive amount of murder, and it's continuing, as you will see, into this year. And a lot of what I said is continuing into this year. And those 16 cities almost all share something in common, which is progressive Democrat mayors and, to some extent, extremely strange prosecutors, almost non-prosecutors, people who act as public defenders, come from that background and were put in office with millions and millions of dollars spent by George Soros for the specific purpose of really deconstructing the criminal justice system and deconstructing the police. So now we come to the last two weekends. So the Memorial Day weekend was a shock. It was a shock, and even with a country now that's getting used to, record increase in murder one year, 16 cities with record increases in murder the next year. The weekend really, I think, shocked the American people. There were murders all over the country. Now, the mass murder in Uvalde and the mass murder in Buffalo of course, brought a lot of attention to this situation. But these others that are described as mass murders, don't know that you can categorize all these the same. Mass murder is simply defined as 4 or more. When we think of mass murder in the sense of Uvalde or Buffalo or the prior ones that took place in the past, we think more of a more or less insane person or mentally ill person who for some reason could be white supremacy, racism like in Buffalo, or it could be black hatred of whites like in Waukesha at Christmas time, or it could be just complete derangement. And even in the cases where it's a white who's killing blacks for racial reasons, or a black killing whites for racial reasons, there's a good deal of mental deterioration involved as well. But now we're looking at mass murder as just quantitative, not necessarily in the category of these, shocking, insane acts where a school is attacked, or an entire supermarket is attacked, or a parade is attacked. So over the Memorial Day weekend, there were basically murders all over the country. In one incident, 7 people were shot, 6 wounded, 1 killed in Benton Harbor, Michigan. In Philadelphia, there were 4 people shot, with 2 killed and another 2 wounded. During the Sunday of a Memorial Day in Henderson, Nevada, there were 7 people wounded in one shooting. In Merced, California, there's 1 person killed and 3 wounded. Phoenix, Arizona, there were 6 people shot. Houston, Texas, 4 people were shot. And in Taft, Oklahoma, 8 people were shot, including 1 killed and another 7 wounded. Chattanooga, Tennessee, 6 people were wounded. So that's Memorial Day. What a way to spend Memorial Day, huh? Not exactly in solemn memory of those who died to keep our freedom. Because living in a country or a city with a massive amount of crime is not having freedom. There was an article that I don't think most people saw. A Chicago 911 dispatcher slammed city leaders after Memorial Day weekend bloodshed, and he basically says this nonsense has to stop. Over Memorial Day, they were counting 38 dead and dozen wounded nationwide. And then the calculation for Chicago is astounding. According to the Chicago Sun-Times, 52 people were shot in the city and 10 were killed. 52 people were shot in the city and 10 killed. And the dispatcher makes a very, very simple statement. Very simple statement. Thornton Jr. stressed nothing is going to change unless the city's leadership changes its course on its soft approach on crime. That's been going on for 50 years of Democrat rule. However, it was Philadelphia which had the highest number of fatal shootings, with 13 people dead. And Philadelphia has actually, I think the first and maybe most notoriously lawless Soros prosecutor Krasner, who has basically destroyed that city. And now we come to this weekend, and we've got 13 mass shootings over this weekend. Again, I'm telling you, defined as 4 people shot. I really do think for purpose of analysis, we're putting too many different types of murders in one category, but it does illustrate the enormous amount of violence going on in this country. I don't know the best way to describe it. Do we call it an epidemic or pandemic and bring back COVID theories, or what? I mean, I have a lifetime of experience with violent crime, going back to growing up in New York, in Brooklyn, and then even though I moved to suburban Nassau County as a high school student, I went to Bishop Auckland High School in Bedford-Stuyvesant for 4 years as that community was beginning to develop a tremendous amount of crime. Later on, one of the most dangerous parts of New York City. And then I've lived in New York City all my life, except for a short stint in the Ford administration and a rather long one in the Reagan administration. So I'm a lifelong New Yorker, and having been the U.S. attorney in New York and the mayor of New York, I think it would be unusual if I weren't the person who probably knew New York City the best of anyone, at least from the point of view of crime. And I've seen all kinds of crimes and all kinds of crime epidemics. This one is different, and it's more pervasive, much more pervasive, because I believe it's actually somewhat different causes, because I think it's organized, and you'll see why in a minute. So this weekend, just to continue what happened on Memorial Day weekend, there were 13 mass shootings, defined as at least 4 people shot. And once again, in Philadelphia, 2 men, 22 and 34, were, and a 27-year-old woman, so that's 3 people were killed in the shooting, 11 others were wounded. That's one shooting. And the wounded range in age from 17 years to 69 years. In Chattanooga, there were multiple shots fired. 2 victims died from gunshot wounds, and then 1 person was killed by an automobile. And then there were a group of people in critical condition. Of course, New York doesn't want to be left out, so New York had shootings in Brooklyn and the Bronx, killing 1 man and leaving 4 others injured. One was a drive-by, and it is true that there's a slight drop in shootings, although last month's tally was still up significantly from May of 2019. So yes, it is down from last year's enormous high, but it's still quite a bit higher than before. Many of the incidents, many of the causes that we're going to talk about occurred, none of which have anything to do with gun control. I think this would be a good time to take a short break, and we will be right back. Think your homeowner's insurance covers home title fraud? Think again. And neither does your common identity theft program. The FBI calls home title fraud one of the fastest growing crimes, which is why you need to go to HomeTitleLock.com, America's leader in home title protection. Here's the problem. The deed to your home is the only document that proves you own it. And the deeds to all of our homes now are online. In minutes, a criminal can find and forge your name off the deed to your home and refile as the new owner. Like Jeff, who spent a fortune in legal fees after a thief forged himself onto the deed to Jeff's home and took out loans. Jeff didn't have Home Title Lock then. He does now. Or Deborah, who thought our common identity theft service would protect her. Then a criminal got onto the deed to a home and had her evicted. Deborah has Home Title Lock now. HomeTitleLock.com is your peace of mind, and the deed to your home is protected. Visit HomeTitleLock.com. HomeTitleLock.com. Welcome back. Well, we kind of set the stage for where we are right now. We're in a unprecedented major crime epidemic and spreading through America, largely in cities, but spreading through America. And the response of the party in control and the president, right down to his media sycophants, is a one-line approach, and one line it is: gun control. We need more gun control. To focus exclusively, as the Democrats do, on gun control, and to repeat it almost as if it is, and it is, a scripted line by every Democrat politician, from our inept president to our ineffective governor of New York, to their shills on television and radio, and just say gun control, gun control, gun control. Well, to blame the gun exclusively is to ignore the killer completely. And in fact, it's one of the reasons why we have so much crime. If we spent the same amount of time, effort, and money on the real causes of why we're having this crime epidemic that we do on gun control, we could turn the crime epidemic around in about 2 months. But because we create this distraction, which has no connection at all to what's happening right now, it's just going to get worse and worse and worse, as it did in New York, from John Lindsay through David Dinkins, until a Republican took over with a law and order approach rather than a pro-criminal approach. Now, how can I prove to you that changes in the gun control laws, or the changes being proposed, have no bearing on the crime that are being committed now? Instead of getting ourselves all confused, let's use our common sense for a moment. Just a few years ago, back in 2017, 2018, with regard both to the city of New York and the United States, there was almost a feeling that murder and violent crime had reached a rather low. And then all of a sudden, over the next 3 years, with 2020 being the record year for the whole country and 21 for a number of the Democrat cities, crime just soared. Now, during that period of time, was there any change in the gun laws that produced this? Is there anything about the gun laws that were different in 2014, 15, and 16? In 2020 and 2021 that you can say, oh, it was that change in the gun law, and therefore let's go change it back or fix it? Or were the gun laws largely irrelevant to what happened, and therefore we're legislating about the wrong thing in order to take the emphasis off the correct thing, which is human behavior, criminal behavior, and mental illness, and the lack of morality in our society? Those are very deep subjects. And the party that is using this propaganda is the party responsible for the decline in all of those areas, for basically enacting criminal-friendly legislation and putting criminal-friendly mayors and prosecutors in the key cities, in attacking the police unfairly, viciously, horribly, and defunding them. It's responsible for releasing people from the mental institutions and not strictly enforcing the laws with regard to mental illness, so that we have mentally ill people walking all over our streets. And it's the party that largely doesn't enforce the gun control laws that exist. And I can take you back to when I became mayor of New York and inherited a city that was averaging 2,000 murders a year under 20 or 25 years of Democrat rule. And I reduced it more than any mayor has ever reduced murder ever in history. 65% for the city, 80% for the African American community. New gun control laws didn't help me do that. You know what helped me do it? Strict enforcement of the law, including the gun control laws. The basic reason for what we have going on, of much greater importance than we ever talk about, is the failure, as a matter of policy, of the current progressive Democratic Party to embrace strict enforcement of the law against criminals in order to protect victims. The criminals have become the constituency of the Democratic Party, not the innocent victims. So the gun control laws stayed the same when the city had 2,200 murders as they were when the city went down to 500 murders and when the city went down to 300 murders. And then they stayed the same when the city set a record in 2020 for 50% increase in murder, 100% increase in shootings. Almost met that record last year. And then the other cities around the country set a record for increase, and actually for the highest number ever in the history of the city last year, and are doing it again this year. All during that period, the gun control laws were the same. And the difference was failure to enforce the gun control laws, as well as failure to enforce many, many other laws. So just so you don't have to take my word for it, because I am a Republican. You knew that, right? I'll give you this from a Democrat. Now, the Democrat, we got to get all the biases on the table here, because we're trying to do this based on a pure, let's call it Platonic exercise of common sense, maybe Aristotelian exercise of common sense, reasoning. This is from a United States Congressman from New York, Tom Suozzi, who also was a county executive, so he has executive responsibility, and he's running in the Democratic primary for governor against feckless Hochul, who is running a completely ineffective, feckless government, almost a joke, except it gets people killed, as you'll see. In response to the bloody racist massacre at a Buffalo supermarket, the legislature just passed a package of gun control measures. That's good. But New York had already passed laws in response to mass gun violence that aren't being enforced. After Parkland, they barred, they allowed a state judge to issue an order barring an individual from buying guns who was dangerous, because the judge has to find out about it. And that law was specifically designed for the 18-year-old in Buffalo who basically took out a newspaper ad and said, I'm gonna go kill those kids. I mean, what he did was he told the teacher that after graduation he would commit murder and suicide. School officials did what they should do. They contacted the state police. The state police had him examined by health experts, and then it dropped off everyone's radar. Is that any different than the Boston Marathon massacre? Is it much different than what happened in Texas? Maybe a little worse, because the signs were clearer. Not long ago, Mike Lindell, the inventor of MyPillow, and his team fit me for my very own MyPillow. They also introduced me to their wide assortment of other incredible products, like their mattress topper, their sheets, towels, slippers, and more. Sleep is incredibly important to me, and I can assume for all of you. It's time you give MyPillow a try and see for yourself. Listeners have helped build MyPillow into the incredible company it is today, and Mike Lindell wants to give back to all of you. You can get great discounts on MyPillow products by going to mypillow.com right now and seeing each of the specially priced items. including those in the radio listener special square. You're going to see rotational offers up to 66% off on products like their pillows, mattress topper, Giza sheets, but also new products like their slippers, weighted blankets, robes, and waffle blankets. All MyPillow products come with a 60-day money-back guarantee. Enter promo code RUDY for these great specials. That's MyPillow.com and use the promo code RUDY. The government of New York State is entirely inept. It is a 100% political operation. No matter if it's the focus on substantive enforcement of the law is just about gone. When a governor can accept a district attorney like Breed, who says, I'm just not going to enforce certain laws. I'm not going to enforce certain categories of laws. A governor like Hochul can do that. And a mayor like Adams, you've basically set the stage for a massive amount of crime because the law doesn't mean anything to you. They're too politically damaging to do what has to be done, which is to remove it. And as Swazi points out, there were red flag laws that existed that should have brought the behavior of this, whatever you want to call them, to the attention of the authorities, either for a commitment by a judge or at least an entry in the record so that he could not be able to get a firearm or he would be closely watched. None of that happened. So why would you think that if you passed new laws, they'd be any more enforced than the non-law? And when you don't enforce the law, you don't enforce the law. In other words, if you have DAs that basically don't enforce the law, they're not going to go, they don't know how to do it. They don't even know how to be tough on gun crime because they don't know how to be tough. Now, you want to know how I did it? How did I use gun control? I enforced the law. Strictly. Tough. Mandatory sentences. Caught you with a gun and you had it illegally, you went to jail. None of this no bail, cash bail. You went to jail for 1 year if you illegally possessed a gun. But I enforced all the laws that way, not just the gun control laws. And when you're one of these pro-criminal prosecutors, you get into the habit of not enforcing the laws, and you get into the habit of being negligent like they were with this guy. And more laws in the hands of Soros treasonous prosecutors is not going to do a damn thing. And I'm telling you what the gun control debate is doing. And this is why they're doing it. It's distracting you from what they don't want you to look at, which is the way in which the programs of the Democrat Party, progressive, socialist, communist, are basically to undermine the morality of America, the decency of America, and the decency of our citizens. And they've been doing that because they want to crush our form of government and make us into a one-world socialist communist enterprise. That is certainly the aim of George Soros, or he wouldn't have put $40 million into electing these treasonous DAs in places he has no interest in. It is certainly the objective of the president, if he has an objective, because he's constantly attacking the United States at every chance that he gets, calling us systemically racist. Only evil people. We must be an evil nation if we're systemically racist. Now, if in fact you want to look at what changed and you want to be constructive, as it sounds like Swazi at least has a willingness to do, he says that 69% of New Yorkers say Hochul has failed on crime. Trying to figure out who the 31% who doubt that. She's been a disaster. She expanded Cuomo's bail laws. The election of Cesar Boudin in San Francisco is not the only thing that's destroying San Francisco, but is sure as heck doing a pretty good job of it. The city is a disaster. The election of Krasner in Philadelphia, Pennsylvania, has made Philadelphia really a pretty good a competitor with Chicago as a killing field. He declined prosecution right at the beginning for property crime. They went to the top on property crime. He denied prosecution on people for possession of drugs and including sale of drugs. And those crimes went up. Now violent crimes and murder are going up. Last year, the largest number of murders in the history of Philadelphia under Larry Krasner, a non-prosecuting prosecutor. Paid for, signed, sealed, and delivered from one world George Soros. Then we have George Gascon, where property crime went through the roof and other crimes went through the roof, only to be outdone by Cesar Boudin, the son of two cop killers. And since he took office, burglaries have gone up 45%. And over Gascon, homicides have gone up by 37%. Here's a little bit of good news. It looks like Boudin is on his way out. The polls seem to suggest that San Francisco, some large number of people in San Francisco, the two Republicans and all the Democrats, want him out. I mean, Boudin by himself abolished cash bail. That's probably where Hochul and Cuomo got it from. And this is what we have now all over the country. This, what I'm describing to you, these DAs are the reason for the large increases in murder. Changes in the gun control law are not going to change that. If you want to change it, change the DAs. On New Year's Eve, a man driving a stolen car hit and killed two women in downtown San Francisco. The alleged driver, Troy McAllister, was a parolee. He had a rap sheet. I used to throw him across the room to show him to the press when I was changing all this. Arrested 5 times in 6 months for various crimes. In each case, Boudin declined to file charges or to put him in jail. Boudin is responsible for her death. When you're in public office, you have the lives of people in your hands. And when you're irresponsible or where you're ideologically perverse, like these socialists and communists are, you get people killed, like the president did in Afghanistan. Under Boudin, the conviction rate went from 60% under Gascon, which is pathetic, to 39%. That means that means 61% of the people who get arrested go free. Must be the cops are arresting all the wrong people in San Francisco. And this is true of Kim Foxx in Chicago and Marilyn Mosby in Baltimore, Krasner in Philadelphia, Bragg in Manhattan, all due to George Soros and the $40 million that he put in to undermine America. It isn't just to undermine our criminal justice system, it's to undermine us. And if you want somebody that killed a lot of Americans, it's George Soros. Not gun control. George Soros, biggest contributor to the Democratic Party, Black Lives Matter, and Antifa. How about you do something about him instead of gun control? Then we can work on gun control. If we ever put the time and attention to the real things that are going on that need to be changed, we could solve this. We did it before. I did it. It would take me just a few months to do it if I had the support. what do? Well, the first thing you do is you do what my son recommended a few days ago for New York. You set up a refund the police program. In New York, I believe it's about $5 billion. It would probably be similar in the big states and much less in the smaller states, but it depends on how much was taken from them. And you put back the resources that were taken out. De Blasio took $1 billion out of the New York Police Department. Hasn't been put back. It's not operating with the same number of police that I had. None of these cities are. First of all, you need the right number. Then you need a CompStat program that sets up accountability. And you assign your police based on where your crime is, not based on political and racial preferences. In fact, just the opposite. It should be race neutral, crime specific. Then you remove every DA who fails to live up to their oath. In New York, the governor of New York can remove a district attorney who breaks the law by failing to enforce the law. And in the case of New York, my son, Andrew Giuliani, has promised on his first day of office, he'll remove Mr. Bragg. That should shake a few trees, huh? And then you have got to enforce the gun laws that exist and enforce them strictly. How is it possible? How is it possible that the President of the United States can, in a straight face, look at us and tell us we need more gun laws when his son is a major violator of the present gun laws? And it looks like the Secret Service and a couple of other agencies fixed the case. His son is as we all know, a lifelong massive drug user who bought illegally and possessed illegally a .38 revolver. The crime carries 10 years as its maximum count. He hasn't even been questioned. Meanwhile, over the weekend, they shackle a guy, take him off a plane for allegedly contempt of Congress, which doesn't even sound like it's happened. It's a dispute over executive privilege, but okay, contempt. 1 year misdemeanor. The guy's put in shackles. The other guy's walking around with a .38 revolver, and we got pictures of him driving automobiles, smoking crack. How do you expect to have the moral suasion to have a country respect the law when your high officials like Biden hide crime, when officials like Hochul are too inept to enforce laws or lack the courage to deal with errant district attorneys? How do you expect to reduce this massive amount of crime with district attorneys who let 30, 40, 50% of the criminals go free? And then they reach back and they take ones out of prison who kill police officers. I mean, Philadelphia is on its way to being the biggest crime city in America. And the Soros has set up a terrific competition between Philadelphia and Chicago. It was Chicago that held that position. You know, on weekends, it was always how many people would die in Chicago. Now it's how many people will die in Philadelphia. Is this what we want to be? And are we really going to let them get away with it by saying what Chucky Schumer said about gun? You know, it's gun control. We don't want the police in the schools because we don't want more guns in the schools. I think the American people want just the opposite, Schumer. I think they want our schools hardened. And I think anyone running for governor, my son or anyone else, should be in favor of immediately reevaluating every single school and opt on the side of safety for the children. And police officers in those schools, as we're going through this crisis, is mandatory. I was told by the Board of Education when I became mayor I couldn't put police in the schools. I said, step aside. I'm the mayor. It's my responsibility to keep those children alive. It's your responsibility to educate them, which you're not doing a very good job of, but I'm going to do a good job of keeping them alive. And my cops are going into those schools. There's nothing that says that those schools are somehow exempt from the same safety measures we take throughout the entire city. In fact, they should have more. Harden the schools' security and build up the police morale. We've been sitting by while the left in this country has been beating the hell out of the police unfairly. Number one, Mr. President, the police in this country are not systemically racist. Withdraw that comment. It's a lie. And it's a lie coming from a guy who was friends with racists, which makes it all the more galling. I know the police a lot better than you do because I've worked with them constructively. You got more racists in your administration than they have in the police department. These are the changes that are necessary and more. We've got to take a look at mental illness. We've got to rebuild the mental institutions we used to have. We've got to set penalties for people who don't report when they should. And here, it gets down to one simple thing in conclusion. This is happening because of the massive disrespect that is part of the platform of the Democrat Party for the police, for law, for decency, for Western civilization, for morality, for God. In 2016, I happened to go to the Democrat convention in Philadelphia. I went on the convention floor, and this police captain from the Philadelphia Police Department, who then invited me over to a gym. We did a little boxing thing because it was Rocky's town. And he said to me, Mayor, I got to tell you something. Do you know that Hillary Clinton will not allow uniformed police officers inside the convention hall? I said, what? She said, no, she doesn't want uniformed police officers inside the convention hall. And I said, aha, that makes sense to me because, she overlapped with me for 1 year as a senator when I was the mayor. She wanted uniformed police officers in her detail when we protected her. That would be a bad sign for her electorate. Well, it's gotten much worse than that now with the defund the police and their systemic races, they're blamed for everything. I don't know. A lot of criticism of the police in Texas. I don't know yet. What I hear, I don't like. I have to say that. I'm more than willing to criticize the police when necessary. I prosecuted a lot of police officers. Even when I was mayor, no one ever notes it, but in one incident that was really horrific, we had the police officer put away for 25 years. Police have to be prosecuted when they break the law too, but they don't do it very often. And most of the incidents are, if anything, hysterically exaggerated. And then no emphasis is given to the ways in which death happens for Black people most often. To say something like, I tell my son to be very, very worried about the police, is kind of like misleading your son if you're an African-American father, because the chances are 9 out of 1,000 that a young Black boy, child, man in Philadelphia or Chicago is going to be killed by another Black, about 80, 90%. Then we're not doing anything about that either. That's what we should be doing something about. That's what I did something about. And I brought that murder rate down 80%. It's a lot of lives that were saved. And there are a lot of lives that could be saved now. I'd love to see my son Andrew get the opportunity to do that as governor of New York, because I know he can do it. Because not only does it take the ideas and the thinking, and he grew up in a police environment, and then worked with President Trump, which, like I say, for 4 years, which was like 16, working with somebody else in terms of getting training and getting it done. Whoever got things done faster than him. This has got to get done. Not in Biden time, which is never, so that our country can get ruined before it gets done. It's got to get done now. It can be done right away, starting on day one. Murder could start going down right away if you did those things. If you reinstated constitutional stop and frisk, which exists right in the Justice Department. Just go back and get the ruling of Janet Reno and Eric Holder in 2001 on an entirely constitutional method of stop and frisk and utilize it. And forget that it was my method, because then, of course, it's bad if it's mine. Come on, start representing us. All of you Democrats, start representing the innocent people. Right now, the Democratic Party, the constituency is completely the criminals. It's a criminal-friendly party with a criminal-friendly president. And you get a chance to change that in November 2022 and in upcoming primaries. Watch out for the Rhino Republicans that are just a little bit behind the Democrats. And you see them there sucking up on all these things that would be just useless in reducing crime and ignoring the tough things, but the realistic things. I can say this with great authority because I've had the most success of any living human being in reducing crime. And what they're doing is a travesty. The Democrats and the Rhino Republicans who are cooperating with them. The only way we're going to make this country safe, the only way we're going to save it, is to vote them out of office. Thank you. God bless you, and God bless America.